Hey, welcome to EV Plug Life. This is another short video, and this is going to be 5 tips for winter driving. It's Thanksgiving week here, and we got a few inches of snow on the ground this week, and it hasn't left for the last couple days. And just thought I'd share a few things that's been helpful for us driving with our Leaf back here, and then also our Bolt that we have in the driveway there. So I've been driving. I've lived in Central Oregon for most of my life, and so I've been driving in the snow quite a bit. Some of these tips are the same as you would have for a gasoline vehicle. Some of them are slightly different. Some of them are things that your gas vehicle doesn't necessarily do. So here's the first couple things. So item number 1 is traction tires. Now, traction tires you're probably going to want to get on any vehicle, whether it's electric or whether it's gas or diesel. But there's something I absolutely recommend. You can get studless or studded tires. Now, a lot of places have laws that only allow you to have the studded tires at certain times of the year, so pay attention to that wherever you live. But in this case, we have studded tires on both our cars. We bought them used, so sometimes you can find them used on Craigslist or Marketplace. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about studded tires. This is our Leaf, and you can see we've got tires that are siped, and they've got these little metal studs in them. And those are good for digging into the ice and stuff, but they do some damage to the road when there is no snow on the ground. So, like I said, there's many states or many locations don't allow them, or they don't allow them at certain times of the year. But I do find that they're fairly invaluable. You might want to try the studless tires. I hear they work really well also. So you can try those out, but they definitely make a difference when you're driving in the white stuff here. And sometimes you can find them inexpensive used on like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or something like that, and get them even cheaper. And you can get them mounted, like we have an Amis here mounted just on some old steel rims, and those we can dismount and mount these tires without having to go to a tire shop and wait, because we can just keep them on these rims for the winter. And that's something I recommend too, because I just spent several hours at a tire shop today getting the tires mounted on the Bolt, because we don't have rims that will fit the Bolt at the moment. So another traction device that can be used in the snow, and preferably in the packed snow on the roads or a little bit deeper snow, not necessarily the icy roads, they're known as chains or sometimes cables that go on your over your tires. They're good to carry if you're going over passes and stuff like that. But here they are. This is what I'm talking about. So here's the Bolt, and we didn't get our snow tires on the Bolt in time, but as you can see, we are using the cables that go across here. They just wrap around the tire, and they give you traction when you're driving down the road. Now, the disadvantage of these is that you really can only go like 30 to maybe 40 miles an hour, depending on your style of chains or cables. They come in all different kinds of styles. The most important part about them, though, is that you break them out, try them out before you have to in an emergency, before you're out in the snow, like this, trying to put them on, because it's much easier to do that. And in our case, we knew the snow was coming. We actually put them on the night before, and we were good. But we have the traction tires on the Leaf right now, so although I'm actually heading down to try and get our traction tires on the Bolt today, but it is all the tire shops are busy because of the snow, so we'll see. But yes, those are another option you can use. I wouldn't count on them to being like an all-winter option, but maybe, to get you through a real snowy day or something like that. So the other thing with chains is that you want to make sure that you have the right size that'll fit your tire. And you also want to make sure that they are on nice and snug. Otherwise, they're going to slap around or they're going to pop off. They could do more damage under there. So you got to make sure you have the ones that fit your tire. So check your tire size and then find the set of chains that will fit your tire size. Most chains will fit multiple different tire sizes, so you just want to make sure you have the right one. They can be inexpensive too. They can be $20. They can be up to $100. Depends on what you're looking for them. But they're a good emergency traction device. So item number 2 is preheat. Now you might do that with your gas car. You might go out, start it up, or even have a remote starter for it to preheat in the morning. However, one of the features on some of these electric cars, like the Nissan Leaf behind me here, is a timer. It will, you can set the timer and it will wake up in the morning, preheat the car, and defrost your windows and all that stuff, heat the cabin up. And it will you just set a departure time for that, and it will preheat your cabin. The great thing about that is you can do that, it'll do that while it's plugged in, and that way you're sucking some power off the wall, not necessarily off your battery. Now our Chevy Bolt over here, it doesn't necessarily have the timer, but it does have a feature on the key fob that you can remote start it. So with the key fob here, you lock it twice and then press the remote start button here, and that will start it, and it will preheat for about 10 minutes before it stops. So if you go longer than 10 minutes, you're gonna have to restart that. So that is a good feature. Those also do that while it's plugged into the wall, so you're not pulling a whole bunch of power off the battery to preheat your car. And it is nice that it is you can come out to a warm car in the winter instead of icy cold and having to scrape everything. So those are nice features. Also, you can set them up while they're plugged in, so you can save some power for your car, because you will get reduced range in the winter. You're going to be using a lot more power to heat your cabin. And the cold does affect lithium polymer batteries. You don't get as they're not as effective in the cold. So item number 3 is going to be plug in overnight. So this is a tip on twofold. It goes with item number 2. So that way when you go to preheat in the morning, you're plugged in and you're not sucking power off of your battery, you're sucking power off of the wall, so that it's a little more efficient to preheat your car. Secondly, if you don't plug in overnight, your car, if it gets too cold, your car is going to suck power off the battery anyway to keep the battery warm. So the Nissan Leaf, the Chevy Bolt all have systems set up so that if the battery gets too cold, they have battery warmers on them, so it prevents the battery from freezing and destroying itself. So definitely you want to stay plugged in. We experienced this at Crystal Crane Hot Springs in a video you might see coming up. And we did not leave the car plugged in overnight, and it got about 17 degrees. We showed up there, we had 20 miles of range. We woke up in the morning, we had 13 miles of range, and that's because the battery was heating itself overnight, so it wouldn't freeze. So definitely plug your car in overnight when possible. You won't lose as much power off the battery, and it'll also help maintain the temperature on it. Okay, so item number 4 is going to be using your brake and regen mode when it's icy and snowy outside. Now, there's a little bit of difference of opinion on this I've seen online. However, I have found that using my brake mode in the Leaf or using the L mode in the Bolt have been very effective at slowing the vehicle down when you want to come to a stop. Without having to touch your brakes and without having to go into a slide, especially the Bolt's one pedal style driving has been very effective so far this winter at slowing the vehicle down when you're coming to a stop without pressing those brakes and risking going into a slide. So it's similar to shifting down in a standard stick shift gasoline or diesel vehicle. You're adding compression in those vehicles to slow. You're using engine compression to slow your vehicle down. In this case, you're using the regen brake to put energy back into the car, but also it slows you down without the calipers actually squeezing and potentially locking up your tires and going into a slide. Now, obviously, you need to use this in conjunction with driving slow, driving to the conditions of the road, and things like that. These are just tips that we use to help us drive. The Leaf, the brake mode is a little less effective. You still have to use the brake and drive a little slower. But I have found I really enjoy the Bolt's L mode or brake mode for the winter driving. It seems to work really well. Haven't really induced any slides due to that. So, but always drive to the conditions of the road. So, if it's icy out, to give yourself a little extra leeway to stop. So, item number 5 on our list is using the cabin heat as little as possible. So one of the things, one of the realities in electric vehicles is that the batteries and your range are a little less effective in the colder weather. So you have a little less range depending on how cold it is outside. And that's dependent on a couple of factors. One, all of your heating is coming from the battery also. And two, the batteries themselves are a little less effective in colder weather. So to mitigate that, what you can do is try and use the most efficient heating you can. Now, in some of the Leafs, the older style Leafs, I know the SV and SL for the 2013 models, the older body styles, they had a much more efficient heater than the S model. So if you live in a colder climate, you might want to consider the SV or SL instead of the S base model for that vehicle because you'll use a less power to heat the cabin. But with that said, you might want to try also using the seat heaters instead of trying to do the cabin heat. It's a lot more efficient to heat your seat and your bum and your backside to keep your body warm than it is to just heat all of the air around you. Now, we have found that you need to use the defroster quite a bit during the winter, so you definitely probably want to use that for safety. Make sure your windows are clear and defrosted, but you want to aim that cabin air at the defrosters to do that instead of trying to heat the entire cabin. You'll use your energy more efficiently if you're using your seat heaters and instead of trying to heat all the air around you. So here's what I'm talking about a little bit in the Bolt. You have this range impact screen, and it can help you guide you on how to make your car more efficient, get a little more range out of it when you need it. But you can see here the outside temperature is giving us a negative 5.7 miles on our range, and that's because it's 23 degrees outside. It's actually a little warmer than it has been today. Our climate settings right here are minusing 16.5 miles, and that's because we had the heat. I've had the heater on. We have the seat heaters going. We have the heated steering wheel going and things like that. So pay attention to that number. You want to get it more towards the middle for your range, at least during the winter. Now, sometimes you can't help it. It's just cold outside and you're going to lose a little power. So you're just going to have to plan ahead when it comes to those things. But that's not a big deal. Driving around town, I found that the Bolt is more than effective for heating us up and keeping us warm and doing all those things. So in closing, driving in the winter, you can do it in your electric car. It does take a little more planning sometimes, just like it would in a gas car. You do lose a little bit of range, but you can mitigate that by staying plugged into the wall, using your seat heaters, and also just being mindful of your car, keeping it plugged in overnight so it maintains that battery temperature. Anyway, hope these tips were helpful. and hope to see you in the next video of EV Plug Life. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this video.